Record. Excellent. So, good evening, everyone. And tonight is our second in the last seven series of the iMeditate workshops. Last week we began these final seven workshops with what I think is kind of the foundation beneath everything else that iMeditate has ever been about, really. That you're not broken. There may be parts of life that we want to change. There may be reactions we don't particularly like, fears we've carried for years, or ways of coping which have become more troublesome than helpful. But there's a profound difference between saying there's something here I'd like to change and saying something's fundamentally wrong with me. And last week, I think we began loosening that second idea. Tonight, we take the next step, because when we begin to recognize we're not broken, there is something else which can keep the old world firmly in place. And that's the story we've learned to tell about ourselves. So tonight we're going to explore. Oh, thank you, Fee. I'll leave that bit in the video. That the oldest and I think most useful actually idea from NLP. I'll say that again, NLP, because otherwise it might not have sounded as it was meant to. And that is that the map is not the territory. Now, these words can sound a bit technical, but the idea itself is incredibly simple. A map of Shropshire is not Shropshire. You cannot stand on the map and feel the longmin beneath your feet. You can't smell woodland on a printed symbol for a forest, and you cannot experience the steepness of a hill by looking at a contour line. And I found that one out the other week. The map represents the landscape. It's useful precisely because it leaves almost everything out. And our minds do something very similar. We create maps, maps of other people, maps of relationships, maps of the world. And perhaps most importantly, maps of ourselves. I'm confident. I'm anxious. I'm bad with money. I'm unlucky in relationships. I'm the strong one. I'm the person people leave. I cannot cope with confrontation. I always mess things up. I'm too much. I'm not enough. And after we've repeated one of those descriptions for long enough, something kind of strange happens. We forget it's a description. And we start to confuse the map for the territory itself. So not, I've had experiences which taught me to expect rejection, but I'm unlovable. Not, I sometimes become anxious in situations where I feel uncertain, but I am an anxious person. Not, I made a decision which did not work, but I always get things wrong. A description becomes an identity. And once that happens, the mind becomes extremely good at protecting the map. It notices what fits and it overlooks what does not. It remembers the examples which confirm it, and gradually the map begins to determine where we are willing to travel. And so that's what we're going to explore tonight. Not how to replace every unpleasant thought with a happy one, not how to pretend that painful things don't happen, and certainly not how to persuade ourselves that everything which has ever hurt has secretly happened for our benefit. Sometimes stuff just hurts. Sometimes someone behaved badly. Sometimes we messed up. Sometimes life was unfair. Reframing does not require us to lie about any of that. What it gives us is something subtler. The recognition that what happened and what it must forever mean are not the same thing. And between those two things, there may be more freedom than we realized. So our minds really cannot function without making meaning. Just imagine if every morning you woke and had to rediscover from scratch what a door was, who your partner was, whether fire was hot, whether the road outside your house was likely to contain cars. We generalize because we have to. Experience teaches us. The child touches something hot and learns to be careful. We recognize faces, we form expectations, and we build a working model of the world. And that is enormously useful. But maps become troublesome when we forget to update them. Perhaps at some point in life, you spoke openly and somebody laughed. A map may have begun to form. Being visible is dangerous. Perhaps somebody important repeatedly withdrew affection when you disappointed them. Another map. Love depends upon getting things right. Perhaps, I don't know, you struggled at school. There's 101 reasons why that may have been, a lot of which, kind of going back to when we were at school, weren't really acknowledged or recognized. But the knock-on effect of that can be a map that says, I'm not clever. And the interesting thing is that the original event can be long gone while the map remains in use. You may now be surrounded by a completely different environment, different people. You may have skills you did not have then. You may have lived through things that your younger version of could never have imagined. And still, you can find yourself navigating by the instructions written decades ago. It's a little like discovering that you've been driving around with a road atlas from 1987. Some roads still exist and some have changed completely. There are roads which did not exist when the map was printed. There are places the old map tells you cannot be reached. And you'd never say the landscape must be wrong because it no longer matches the book. You'd update your map. Yet we rarely extend ourselves the same courtesy. We say, but I have always been like this. Which often means this description has been on my map for a very long time. It's not necessarily the same thing. When we bring memory into this, it adds another interesting layer. We often imagine memory as though there's a filing cabinet somewhere in our brain and an event happens and our mind records it. And whenever we remember it, we just simply go into the filing cabinet, pull out the appropriate file. But the human memory is much more alive than that. It constructs. We remember certain points about a moment in our life, not all of them. The meaning of a memory can alter as we alter. I've probably had an experience of remembering something from years ago and suddenly understanding it differently. The event hasn't changed, but you did. Perhaps at 20 you blamed yourself for something which at 50 you can see was never yours to carry. Perhaps something you once considered a terrible failure now seems like the moment which sent your life in a completely different direction, or possibly the opposite happens. Something you minimized for years can eventually be recognized as significant. The changing meaning does not make either version fraudulent. It shows us that a memory and its meaning are not exactly the same thing. And I think that matters enormously, because sometimes we carry an interpretation of an event long after we've outgrown the person who originally interpreted it. The child says, "Mum is upset. It must be my fault." 40 years later, an adult still feels responsible for everybody else's feelings. A teenager says, "They rejected me. There must be something wrong with me." And years later, somebody enters every new relationship already looking for the moment when they will be left. The younger mind made the best sense it could with what it knew. That map may have been understandable. It may have been protective. But understanding why a map was drawn does not mean we have to keep navigating by it forever. And I want to make something clear. Stories are not bad. Human beings live through stories. We use them to understand where we've been. We create meaning through them. They connect events across time and allow us to recognize ourselves as the same person who existed yesterday and 10 years ago. The problem is not that we have a story. The problem begins when the story becomes too small to contain us. When it says, this is who you are. This is what people are like. This is what always happens. This is as far as you can go. And then there's no room left for information. Something wonderfully Rogerian, Carl Rogers, kind of when he worked with clients, did not try to replace a client's story with his own cleverer interpretation. He created enough acceptance and enough space for the person to hear themselves differently. And that's very different from somebody telling you you shouldn't think like that. Usually when somebody tells us our story is wrong, we defend it. We produce evidence. No, you don't understand. Let me tell you why I'm really hopeless. And we become even more attached to the map. But when somebody listens deeply enough, something else can happen. We hear ourselves. We notice the contradictions. We remember the exceptions. We begin to realize that perhaps the old description, the old map, is not wrong so much as incomplete. And incomplete is definitely much easier to work with. So I'd like you to take a moment now. No need to close your eyes. But think of one sentence you regularly say about yourself. Something familiar. You may want to say it out loud. Maybe you just want to repeat it to yourself. Doesn't have to be the most painful thing in your history, just something workable. You know, I'm terrible at this. I always do this. I can never do that. I'm the sort of person who I've never been able to. Just notice what comes naturally. Um, and then once you've got a sentence, just give me a wave or send up an emoji thing, just so I know you've got something. Anne's got something. Sally's waving. Sally's got a heralding a trumpet blowing out things. I have no idea what that is. And Fiona's nodding. So I'm presuming Fiona's got something as well. Excellent. So, for a moment, don't argue with it. Just hear the sentence. Say it to yourself a couple of times. Say it out loud a couple of times. Notice how finished it sounds. There's something really hypnotic about a statement beginning, I am, I always, I never. It leaves very little room for anything else. The sentence closes the door before anything new has occurred. So now I'd like you to simply add 4 words to the beginning. 4 words, 5 words. My brain's a bit hot and tired. Just add these words to the beginning of that. So if your statement was, I always mess up, just add, up until now, I have. So up until now, I've always messed up. Up until now, I've always struggled to speak up. Up until now, I've often struggled. Listen to the difference. We're not denying anything. We're not fighting it, but we've not declared it. We've not said from this moment onwards, I'm an incredibly assertive person. We've simply removed the assumption that history has already decided the future. Up until now. Up until now. And that leaves space. There's space after those words. I'm no good at something. Says it. That's it. It's final. I'm no good at it. That's me. I'm no good at it. Up until now, I've not been good at it. Introduces possibility. The sentence is now unfinished. And an unfinished sentence can go somewhere. So let's try another addition. Let's add, and that is not all that is true about me. So if your thing was, I get anxious around new people, you'd say, I get anxious around new people. And that's not all that's true about me. I've made mistakes, and that's not all that's true about me. I've been hurt, and that's not all that's true about me. Again, nothing's denied. Nothing is artificially turned positive. The map has just become larger. And sometimes that really is just enough to begin. And there's another distinction which is worth making. Something happens. And then there's what we make it mean. So imagine you send a message and someone doesn't reply to your message. That is what we know. We know we sent a message and someone didn't reply. And perhaps the mind says, oh, they're annoyed with me. Now, that's an interpretation. And then that can lead to, well, I've done something wrong. And then that thought process goes a bit further and goes, God, you know what? This always happens to me. And if we allow that to continue for long enough, we can get to that point where people always lose interest in me. Within perhaps maybe 30 seconds, we've traveled from an unanswered text message, which could literally just be that the person hadn't seen it, to a theory of our entire relational history. That's quite an extraordinarily efficient. And sometimes the interpretation turns to be right. Perhaps they really were annoyed. Perhaps, the purpose is not to distrust every thought. The purpose is to know when we've moved from what we know into what we're assuming. The distinction gives us choice. We can ask, what do I actually know? So in this situation, I know I sent a text, nothing's come back. But then we follow it up with another question. What am I currently making this mean? Not what does this mean? What am I currently making this mean? It could be quite a sobering question, not because the meaning's necessarily wrong, but because suddenly the map appears as a map. We're not saying this is reality. We're just saying this is how I'm interpreting it. This is what I'm making out of it. This is the map I am creating. And we can look at it. We're no longer completely inside it. Think about those iMeditate techniques we've done where we take something, we push it outside of ourselves. We picture it here, we visualize it outside. This is doing that same thing. It's taking the meaning and rather than placing it as an identity, it's putting it out there. So actually, yeah, they might be angry with me. They might be annoyed with me. They might just not have seen it. They could be asleep. Suddenly, it opens up possibilities. There's a version of NLP and positive psychology which can, at times, become, dare I say it, rather irritating. Something painful happens. Some sort of deep loss, some sort of real hurt, something that really and instantly the therapist goes, well, what's the gift? Sometimes the gift is you learn never to ask that person that question again. We do not need to force meaning onto an experience while we're still bleeding from it. They say time heals, and you have to allow a certain amount of time. Dive straight in with some of these questions, and it can be too soon. There are experiences which do need to be grieved before they're reframed. There are things which remain sad. There are losses we would never choose in order to acquire whatever wisdom followed. And I think it's important to say, because otherwise reframing becomes another way of refusing to feel, the question is not, how can I make this good? The question might be, What meaning have I attached to this? And is that the only meaning available to me now? And that's far gentler. Perhaps the loss remains a loss, but I lost something precious does not have to become, I will never be happy again. Perhaps somebody treats you badly does not need to become, it was meant to happen. But neither does it have to remain, this proves I'm unworthy of love. Perhaps you failed at something. Failure may remain the correct word for the outcome. But that is very different from, I am a failure. Events have consequences. Some events carry genuine moral meaning. What we're loosening tonight is not reality. We're loosening the conclusions which have attached themselves to identity. So I'm going to invite you to make yourself comfortable, if you're not so already. And there's no particular position you need to adopt, sitting, lying down, on a chair, on the bed, on the floor, wherever you want to be. Just let the body find that place where it can be supported for a while. And whenever you're ready, allow the eyes to close. Take a nice, comfortable, deep breath in. And just let it leave in its own way. Take a second deep breath in. Hold it, and again, just allow it to leave however it chooses. And a third wonderful deep breath in. Just letting it find its own way out. And notice that you do not need to stop the mind thinking in order to enter this experience. Thoughts can remain. Sounds can remain. You can simply allow one part of your attention to begin moving inward. Just become aware of the body where it meets the chair, the bed, the floor beneath your feet. The fact that you're here now, at this particular point in life. You have arrived here by many routes, some chosen, some unexpected. Some places you moved towards willingly, others you found yourself passing through because life went that way. And perhaps somewhere within the imagination, within the mind, you can begin to sense yourself standing in a landscape. There's no need to create it deliberately. Let whatever comes be enough. Maybe you find yourself thinking of open land or woodland. Maybe it's somewhere completely unfamiliar. Just whatever you sense. For some of you, you might picture yourself there. For others, you might just start thinking about a landscape. And however you're experiencing that now, notice that you have a map, an old map, one that's been folded and unfolded many times. Some of the marks upon it are faded, some have been traced over again and again. Maybe there's notes been written in the margins. And somehow you understand that this is the map you've made of yourself. Not consciously, it's been drawn over years, through experience, through things people said. through decisions you made, through moments when you were hurt, through moments and through things which worked, through good times and the not so good, through things which did not. And perhaps you notice some of the labels written upon it. You may not be able to read them clearly, do not need to. But one may stand out, a familiar description, something you've believed about yourself for a long time. Just allow that one thing to become clear enough and simply notice it. No need to remove it. It belongs to your history. It was written for a reason. And perhaps you can become curious about when that line first appeared on the map. Not searching for an exact memory, not trying to recover anything, just allowing the unconscious mind to sense the period when that description began to make sense. Maybe it was one event, perhaps many. Maybe somebody said something, perhaps nobody ever said it directly, but you came to a conclusion. And recognize the person you were then, the age you were, the knowledge you had, the resources you had available. And there's no need to criticize that version of you. They were drawing the best map they could with the information they possessed. Perhaps they wrote, "Do not go here. People like me cannot do this. Be careful. Do not trust. Stay small. Keep everyone happy." Maybe something like that. And whatever that is, and perhaps at the time those markings served a purpose. They helped you understand. They gave some order to things which felt confusing. Perhaps they protected you. Maybe they guarded you. And so now look up from the map. Actually look at the landscape. Explore with your mind that landscape that you're thinking of. Notice the difference. The maps may say that a road ends, and perhaps beyond you there is a path. The map may mark a place as dangerous, and perhaps the landscape has changed. The map may show an empty space where something now exists. And you realize that the map's not been lying to you. It's simply old, outdated. It contains truth, but not all truth. And perhaps those words can settle somewhere. This contains truth. It does not contain all the truth. So notice the old statement again, the familiar thing you believe about yourself. I'm not good enough, cannot trust, always fail, have to cope alone, whatever yours is. And instead of crossing it out, imagine taking a pencil and writing something beside it. Not an opposite, just something larger, something which includes what happened and also includes what you know now. So perhaps, for an example, I learned to doubt myself, and I've always learned many things. I've also learned many things since. Or I've been hurt by people, and there are also people I've been able to trust. I have failed at things, and failure has never been the whole of me. I learned to cope alone, and I'm beginning to discover what happens when I allow support. So just jot something down. Don't have to be any of these words. Let your own sentence form. Something believable, something spacious, something which does not require you to pretend. Even if your conscious mind is not aware of what that is yet, your unconscious mind is and can write down whatever that is for you. And so just notice what happens when the old statement and the newer understanding can exist on the same page. One does not have to destroy the other. The newer understanding simply prevents the older one from pretending it's the whole of the map. And perhaps this is what real change sometimes looks like. Not ripping up our history, not announcing that the past no longer matters, allowing more information to be included. And perhaps you begin walking now, still carrying the map, but looking up more often. The ground beneath your feet contains information that the map cannot give you. You notice where the path actually goes. You notice conditions as they are. And perhaps somewhere you reach a place marked upon your map with a warning, a place you've avoided. You do not need to enter it. Simply stand nearby and look. Perhaps the warning belongs to something in your life now. Being seen, trusting someone, making a change, setting a boundary, resting, trying again. The old map says be careful, and perhaps that remains worth hearing. But another part of you can look at the actual territory and ask, what is true here now? Not then, now. What resources do I have now? What choices exist now? Who am I now? And perhaps there's still risk. Real life contains risk. Perhaps the old map was not entirely wrong, but perhaps you are no longer the same traveler who drew it. You know more. You have survived more. You can ask for help, you can leave, you can speak, you can make a different decision. And the map can begin to reflect that. Imagine making one small alteration, perhaps adding a new road, opening a gate, changing a question mark, or writing worth exploring. Whatever that is, that little change, just make that now. Nothing dramatic, just a possibility. And so continue walking. Perhaps the landscape leads you towards a place where there's water, a stream, a lake, a river, whatever appears, whatever the sense is that you get. And you can sit for a while, the map resting beside you. You realize that the water cannot be contained on paper. A blue line might represent it, but the line cannot capture movement. Light, sound, temperature, depth. And perhaps something within you understands. The description is never the experience. I'm anxious is not the whole experience of anxiety. There are sensations, thoughts, moments when it intensifies, moments when it fades, situations where it does not appear at all. I am lonely cannot contain the whole person who feels loneliness. I am a failure cannot contain every moment of competence, kindness, persistence, and learning within one human life. Labels are small. Life is larger. And perhaps the most important map of all is the one labeled me. Just notice how many things you have written there. Roles, judgments, achievements, mistakes, what people have thought of you, what you've thought of yourself. And for a moment, just imagine, think about putting that map down beside you. Not throwing it away, just simply putting it down. Who are you before you consult it? Don't answer intellectually, just sit with the question. Who is here before the description? There is breathing, there's awareness, there's the capacity to notice, there's life which is still happening. The map may describe you, but the map cannot contain you. You are always larger than the sentence. And perhaps you can imagine a future moment when an old description appears again. Because it will. The mind loves familiar maps. Perhaps you hear, I can't cope. I always do this. Nobody wants me. It's just who I am. And rather than fighting the thought, you recognize it, an old marking on the map. And you might say quietly to yourself, well, that's one description. And then, what is true here, now? Perhaps the old thought still has something useful to say. Perhaps it contains caution, perhaps pain, perhaps a reminder. You can listen, but you do not have to hand it unquestioned authority. There may be other information, other memories, other possibilities, other roads. And perhaps you can allow a simple physical gesture to become associated with that moment of stepping back. Just placing the index finger to touch the base of the thumb. A gentle crossing of fingers, a resting of the hand on the body. Whatever you choose, make the gesture now. And know that it represents look again. Not everything's fine, not the old story's false, just simply look again. There may be more here than the first interpretation. Just release the gesture. Imagine another future moment, a misunderstanding, a disappointment, a mistake. Notice the speed at which the mind begins drawing conclusions, and then make the gesture. Look again. What happened? What am I making it mean? What else might also be true? No endless analysis, just enough space for choice. And perhaps your unconscious mind can begin learning to create that pause more naturally, a little interruption between event and identity. Something happened. That does not immediately tell me who I am. Someone reacted. That does not automatically tell me what I am worth. A feeling appeared. That does not predict the whole future. An old memory returned. That does not mean I'm still living there. The map can be consulted. The map can be respected. The map can also be revised. And perhaps in some places, the most honest thing we can write is, I don't know yet. I don't know yet. There is an enormous freedom in not knowing, because certainty closes, curiosity opens. And so now allow the landscape to begin fading in whatever way seems natural. You can keep the map. Perhaps it feels different in your hand. Less like a rule book, more like something useful, something provisional, something capable of change. You are the traveler, not the map. Begin to notice the body again, the support beneath you, the sounds of the room, the movement of breath. Perhaps make that small gesture once more, and remember, look again. Take a slightly deeper breath. Allow some movement into the hands and the feet. And when you're ready, just allow your eyes to open. Take your time. Coming all the way back, feeling good. So there's one more. There's quite a lot in. There's going to be quite a lot in all of these last workshops. So there's one more piece I'd like us to explore, because maps are built from language, and there are certain words that make maps remarkably rigid. Always, never, everyone, no one, can't, have to, should. Whenever you hear one of those words inside yourself, it can be interesting to become curious. Not because those words are forbidden, sometimes never is perfectly accurate. I have never climbed Everest, and I never will. That is currently a fact, and one I'm pretty sure will stay a fact. But when we use these words about ourselves, they often hide a great deal of information. I can never speak in front of people. Never. Not once. Not even to 3 people you know. What exactly happens? Where? With whom? What changes when you feel comfortable? Immediately, the map becomes more detailed. And that's something that Bandel and Grinder, who founded NLP, explored beautifully in their work. They noticed that people do not merely suffer from experience. Sometimes they suffer from vague descriptions of experience. I am a failure. It's almost impossible to work with. It describes an entire person, but perhaps what actually happened was I attempted something important, it did not work, and I felt embarrassed. Now we've got somewhere to go. There's an event, there's an emotion, there's a context. The person has returned. Language, which was imprisoning, has become descriptive, and description leaves room for movement. This is not about policing how you speak. It's about hearing when language has turned a temporary experience into a permanent identity. So I'd like you to think again of that old statement about yourself and ask one question. Where is this not true? So maybe your sentence might be, I always give up. So where have you stayed? I cannot trust people. Okay, who have you trusted even a little? I'm weak. Where have you endured? I never say what I need. When have you? Not trying to disprove yourself in a court, you're looking for the information the map left out. One exception is enough. Because once there's an exception, the word always has to loosen. And once always loosens, choice enters. Sometimes the exception is tiny, but that does not matter. A tiny hole lets light through. And there's another place where this becomes particularly important. The stories we tell about other people. They're selfish. She never listens. He doesn't care. They always make everything about themselves. Again, perhaps sometimes that description is useful. Perhaps someone is genuinely behaves selfishly. But notice what happens when a person becomes the label. Everything they do is filtered through it. You don't give them another chance. Even neutral behavior begins to confirm it, and we stop meeting the person and we meet our map of the person. And it's especially powerful in long relationships. We stop being curious because we believe we already know who the other person is. And sometimes the greatest shift in a relationship begins with one very simple possibility. Maybe there's something here I have not yet understood. Does not mean abandoning judgment. It does not mean tolerating bad behavior. It means recognizing that another human being is also larger than our representation of them. There's something deeply respectful in that. And perhaps it's one of the links between NLP and Carl Rogers that I value the most. The map is not the territory. The person in front of me is not my theory of them. I can continue discovering them. So let's finish with something kind of chilled and quiet. Mostly always is. So just take a nice deep breath in. Allow your eyes to close again if you wish. And just feel yourself where you are. Just let that familiar sentence about yourself arise one more time. The old map. Hear it exactly as you usually hear it. And then just picture, imagine, think about that sentence written upon a piece of paper in front of you. Just the words. Just look at it. Those words may describe something you have experienced. They may describe a pattern. They may describe something somebody once believed about you. But the words are not sitting in the chair or lying on the bed or on the floor. You are. The sentence is being noticed. You are the one noticing it. And so perhaps you can say inwardly, this is a story I have carried. And we're not saying it's nonsense, that it never mattered. Just, this is a story I have carried. And maybe it's protected you. Maybe it's helped explain things. Maybe it gave you a certainty when uncertainty was painful. And there's no need to hate the story, but perhaps you can loosen your grip upon it. Just imagine the paper resting in your open hand. You can read it when it's useful. You can learn from it. But you do not have to clutch it tight against your chest. Allow the hand to remain open. And now feel the breath. Feel the body. Hear the room. Be aware of the room and the world outside of the room. All of this exists beyond the sentence. Life has continued beyond the sentence. You have continued beyond the sentence. Maybe another phrase can begin to arise now. Not a replacement belief, a doorway. A simple sentence. I wonder what else is true. And allow that question to remain open. I wonder what else is true. No need to answer it. Not now. I wonder what else is true. And perhaps that can become the practice, not forcing a new story, becoming available to a larger one. Just take a nice deep breath in. Become aware of your body. And when you're ready, just allow your eyes to open. So last week, the invitation was begin looking for the resource beneath the struggle. This week, I'd like you to notice the sentences which close down possibility. Whenever you hear yourself say, I always, I never, that's just who I am, this always happens, pause. Do not need to correct yourself. Simply make your small gesture, whatever that anchor was, and remember, look again. Then ask, what do I actually know? What am I making this mean? And perhaps, what else might also be true? And don't use the questions to talk yourself out of genuine feelings. Use them to create enough space to see whether the old map still matches the territory. That's all. And I think we all need maps. Without them, life would be bewildering. Even with them, sometimes it can be. We need our understanding of ourselves. We need to learn from experience. We need memory. We need ability to recognize patterns. But a useful map is one which can change when the landscape changes. Perhaps one of the reasons people become stuck is that they keep trying to change their life while protecting an old map of who they were. They want confidence whilst continuing to say, I'm not a confident person. They want intimacy whilst carrying people cannot be trusted. They want rest while living from my worth depends upon what I achieve. And then they wonder why change feels so difficult. Perhaps the answer is not to create a wonderful new fantasy about ourselves. Perhaps it's simply to become more accurate. I've been frightened. I've also been brave. I've made mistakes. I've learned. I've been rejected. I have also been welcomed. I have struggled. I'm still here. A fuller map, a truer map, one which leaves room for the territory to surprise us. Because there'll always be things about you which you've not yet discovered. There will always be responses you've not yet made. Relationships you have not yet entered. Versions of you which have not yet had reason to emerge. The map cannot contain those things because they've not happened yet. And that's rather wonderful. It means your history can inform you without having to imprison you. It means a memory can matter without becoming destiny. And it means an old belief can be understood without being obeyed. It means you can honor the person who drew the original map and still say, thank you. I think I need an update to this now. And perhaps this is the invitation from tonight, not to tear up the map, not to despise the person who drew it. Just remember to look up. Look at the actual ground beneath your feet. Look at who you are now. Look at what is possible now. And every so often ask yourself, does the map I carry still describe the territory I am living in? And if it doesn't, well, perhaps it's time to draw another road.